Good morning, everybody. We're glad to have you here at Fort Klamath. I'm Sergeant Hugh Simpson, Baltimore Light Artillery, CSA. This that you see in front of you is a 3-inch ordnance rifle. This was a very, very popular gun in the Civil War on both sides. They were a very high-tech gun in those days. It was made with wrought iron strips welded together, then upset 2 inches, which means they put it in a press while red hot, pressed it down to seize everything together, and then it was drilled. And these guns were very, very reliable. There was only one recorded instance of one bursting during the Civil War, and that knocked the muzzle off when the Union was firing double canister, which I'll explain later, on the Plank Road at the Wilderness. And that gun, I think, is still possibly buried at Todd's Tavern. So no way to tell for sure right now. So the ordnance rifle was a very accurate gun. They cost about $300 in the days of the Civil War. And just to show you, yes, what inflation has risen to, we paid $16,600 for what you see in front of you today. So the prices have gone up since the Civil War, I guess, or our money's gone down, or both. This gun was a very accurate gun. It was a rifled gun. That's why they called it a 3-inch ordnance rifle, or an ordnance rifle, a 3-inch rifle. Okay, it actually was rifled. Can anybody explain what rifling is or what it does? Who knows? Yes, sir.
Rifling is when in the barrel it has these like little nooks inside the barrel.
Grooves, you mean? Yeah.
And if it spins the bullet.
Right. And why does that spinning action of the bullet or the shell come out even? Let's let this gentleman answer.
Because what it creates when the bullet spins through a barrel, it actually picks up speed.
Yeah, and what else does it do? Yes.
Makes it more accurate.
Yes, sir. Very good. You guys are up on stuff. Good job. Okay, so that's what this gun does. It was very, very accurate out to a half a mile. It was not unusual for a well-trained gunner with good ammunition with an ordnance rifle to be able to hit an object the size of a 50-gallon oil drum at about 800 yards. He might not hit it every shot, but then again, remember, a lot of those shells exploded too. So if the fusing was cut right, you know, it would do a lot of damage, okay, and if the fuse worked. At a mile and a quarter, this gun was still very accurate. You could probably hit an object the size of a full-size pickup at a mile and a quarter, okay, and I would say that would be pretty reliable for well-trained gunners with good ammunition. Past about a mile and a quarter, the gun really wasn't all that accurate, because remember, you know, 1860s, so, you know, it didn't have the technology we have today. But it could still do a lot of damage, even out to 2 miles or so on a large body of troops or something they could see well. Remember, there were no men with radios to observe the fall of the shot like we have in artillery today, okay, and radio back to corrections. Another things about this gun that was very interesting was this particular gun used shells up to about 10 3/4 pounds. It generally shot one lighter than that. The favored ammunition for this was Schenkel shells and Hotchkiss shells. Unfortunately, I don't have any examples here today, but I plan to remedy that in the future. It's just one thing at a time, but anyhow, we'll get some eventually and show what they are. But those were pretty good shells for that time and place. They used several different types of fusing for the shells. They had 4 different kinds of ammunition. They shot a solid bolt, which was essentially, and this didn't use cannonballs, remember, it's a rifle. So it would use a kind of bullet-shaped shell, okay? And what it would do was a solid bolt was just what it said. It was solid. And it was used to smash things. It did not explode, but it was very good at smashing holes in things, knocking gun carriages apart. Remember, if you could hit the enemy's gun carriage and essentially break it, the gun would be out of action until they repaired it or replaced the carriage. Okay, the carriage being the wooden part, the wheels, the gun tube, of course, is the actual cannon itself. Another form of ammunition they used was called case shot. It was essentially a case, okay, and it was hollow. In that hollow, they would pour various size balls. For a 3-inch ordnance rifle, probably case shot had maybe 1-inch balls of either iron or lead, okay? They would pour that full of those, and then to make sure they stayed without rattling around, they'd fill the top with melted sulfur or resin. When that hardened, they'd drill out a hole right down the middle of the shell so there'd be a hollow. The hollow was then filled with gunpowder for an explosive charge. The shell was then fused. Okay? They could use a percussion fuse, which went in the front, and a percussion fuse goes off when it hits something. Okay? Or they could use various types of timed fuses. And timed fuse, they could either cut it like a Borman fuse, and it had a 5 1/4 section around, so you could cut it. The gun commander could say, fuse, case shot, 3 seconds. So the person back there would cut it at the 3-second mark. They'd put the fuse in, then when they fired it, they didn't have like a match or anything like that to light the fuse. The flame, when you fire the gun, licks up around the charge and goes to the front, and theoretically, and probably about 40 to 60% of the time, would light the fuse, and there was a powder train in there that would slowly burn, slowly being relative, and then when it got to the 3-second mark, you would want it to explode, okay? Or it had a combination fuse, percussion and time, together. So the fuses in the Civil War were not nearly as reliable as artillery fuses are today. If you could get 50% of your fuses to work as advertised, you were doing pretty well. Okay? The Confederate ammunition was, unfortunately for the Confederates, not as good as the Union ammunition generally, simply because the Union had such excellent industrial capabilities and the South just didn't. So the South had decent ammunition most of the time, and certainly a lot of it killed many, many Union soldiers, but it wasn't quite as good as Federal ammunition ever. Ken, could you think of anything else we should mention about this? I'm kind of sitting here talking. Why don't you say something?
The 4 types of projectiles. Solid shot, which was already covered, case shot, okay, and then just simple explosive shell, which was simply an empty, hollow shell full of gunpowder. The shell was designed to break into pieces, and again with a timed fuse usually, and you'd like to get that over your enemy and in front of them so it would explode as it was coming in. But if you had infantry coming at you and they were within 300 yards, the chief of peace, in this case the sergeant here, would call back for canister. Canister is just what it sounds like. It's a tin can full of musket balls. When those are fired out of a gun, and for military purposes, when you say gun, you mean one of these guys, not one of these guys. Okay? When you fire canister out of the gun, it turns that gun into a huge shotgun. And up to 250 yards, canister was extremely lethal. And on many a Civil War battlefield, whoever was winning was beginning to push the enemy off the field completely and rout them. A line of guns firing canister, sometimes double canister, would stop that infantry charge. One of the most famous examples of that is at Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. It also happened at Malvern Hill and a lot of other battles. You didn't want to see what canister did to human beings. No movies even remotely show you what it was like. Now the movie Gettysburg, which shows Pickett's charge, what you see when the canister goes off is that all these guys get knocked down. Well, that's not what happened. A lot of guys got knocked down, but a lot of them got turned into hamburger. Pieces of bodies flying all over the place. Many people, including important people, their bodies were never found because there was no body left to find. So that's the kind of thing that these kinds of weapons could do, even though technologically, compared to what we got today, we're much better at killing each other now than they were, but they managed.
Okay,
Sergeant.
Thank you.
Second Barrel of Artillery, Baltimore Lights.
Fire! Clear front!